Second oral question, Lord Holmes of Richmond.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask a question standing in my name on the order paper.
The Government wants to ensure that people, regardless of their background or income, have access to useful, affordable financial products and services. To tackle financial exclusion, the Government convenes the Financial Inclusion Policy Forum, which brings together ministers, regulators and industry and the third sector to provide leadership and promote collaboration. Since 2019, the Government has allocated £100 million of dormant assets funding to support Fair for All Finances work to improve access to affordable credit.
My Lords, would my noble friend agree that financial inclusion doesn't just bring economic benefits to the individual financially included, it brings economic, social and psychological benefits to all of us. To that end, would she agree it's high time that we revisit the question of a have regard to financial inclusion duty for the FCA?
Well, my Lords, I'd absolutely agree with the sentiments expressed by my noble friend about the importance of financial inclusion, and the Government does recognise that there has been a strong interest in the proposal for the FCA to be given a separate have regards to financial inclusion. However, at present, the Government's position remains that we believe the FCA's existing objectives and regulatory principles are already well aligned with the objectives of financial inclusion, and we don't believe that a separate have regards to financial inclusion would necessarily lead to a different approach or tangible improvements over the current arrangements to the aim that we all want to see, which is greater financial inclusion and less exclusion.
The Government says that it's in favour of this, but it's watching as banks close in many communities. Many poor areas have no bank at a time when those banks have seen soaring profits. When is the Government going to act to do something about this, to make sure people have access to banking services?
Well, my Lords, there are existing obligations that are enforced by the Payment Services regulator, but noble Lords will also know that the Government's committed to legislating to protect access to cash, and that legislation, those measures will be included in the forthcoming Financial Services Bill.
Does tangible improvement include wider social ownership of assets, wider ownership of popular capitalism? Capitalism isn't very popular at all, and so maybe some reinforcements to spread the benefits of capital beyond those who benefit anyway because they've got capital in the first place.
I would agree with the sentiments expressed by my noble friend, and I think that access to capital is something that that should be offered to the widest range of people so that they can benefit from it.
The biggest barriers to financial inclusion are poverty and regressive taxation that robs people of disposable income. Some 14.5 million people already live in poverty. The poorest 10% of households pay 47.6% of their income in direct and indirect taxes, compared to 33.5% by the richest 10%. Can the Minister explain how and why the Government has created this shameful position of exclusion?
Well, I would say to the noble Lord that in the £37 billion of financial support offered to people this year to support them with the high costs of living, that has been targeted at those on the lowest incomes and those least able to pay. So the Government has taken progressive measures to help protect people against rising costs of living.
Would the Minister agree with me that if you fail 35% of our children at school, then you are going to have a lot of financial exclusion?
My Lords, I would agree that school is a very important place to start for people's life chances and also their financial understanding. I'm pleased to say that under this Government, the achievement gap for children at school between those in the poorest households and those in the wealthiest households has collapsed, has narrowed, and that's something we need to continue to make progress on.
My Lords, pursuing the point on poverty that we've just heard about, is the Minister aware that the poverty premium, which is the extra cost that people in poverty or on low income pay for essential products and services, costs the average low-income household some £430 a year, which is the equivalent to some 10 weeks' grocery bills? So could the noble lady, the Minister, explain why she doesn't think that actually giving the Financial Conduct Authority specific powers to tackle financial inclusion, including the poverty premium, isn't a good idea? I just don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, my Lords, I am aware of the poverty premium, and it can exist in different ways in different sectors. There is already work underway to tackle that poverty premium. For example, the other week in questions, I spoke about work in the insurance sector to ensure those with pre-existing conditions or those who are older can access products. We're continuing to work through the Financial Policy Inclusion Forum to make sure things like the poverty premium are tackled.
My Lords, according to evidence from the Centre for Financial Education, financial habits are formed at around the age of 7. They also tell us that only 20% of primary school children are receiving financial education. That's despite personal, social, health and economic education being a compulsory subject. It's probably too wide a subject for many teachers to be able to cover everything that's required. What is the Treasury doing to work with the Department of Education to ensure that every child from primary school upwards gets decent financial education?
Well, there are a number of different avenues through which financial education is taught at schools, including through the maths curriculum and the citizenship education, as well as PSHE. So the government's well aware of the importance of this topic and continues to work with the Department for Education to make sure that schools and teachers have the resources to ensure children can learn about it.
My Lords. Thank you. My Lords, I'm grateful to the Noble Lord for giving way. Following on from the Noble Lady Baroness Tyler's question about the poverty premium, which sees those who can least afford it forced to pay more for essential goods and services, can the Noble Lady and the Minister say what government is doing to work with energy providers to prevent them charging more for electricity which is accessed via a prepayment meter?
Well, my Lords, prepayment meter customers are covered by the price cap, so do receive protection there, but it is a higher rate for prepayment customers, and Ofgem believe that is necessary to reflect higher operation costs and risks. However, there are a robust a set of rules in place to protect prepayment meter customers, ensuring that if suppliers identify that they're in a vulnerable situation, including where they're self-connecting or self-rationing their supply, they must be offered additional support credit. And in doing so, suppliers must consider also their ability to pay back that credit. So there is a robust set of support available to people in that situation.
My Lords, given that the government has done well in reducing the taper rate, is it not still the case that people in work on universal credit are paying an effective marginal rate of tax of 55%? That is 10% more than the highest paid people in the country. So while we're talking about tax cuts, as we appear to be in the Conservative Party at the moment, would it not be a good idea to reduce the effective marginal rate of tax of those who are poorest in order to encourage people back into work or in work to value their contribution to society?
Can I agree with my noble friend's sentiments? And as he has pointed out, a cut to the taper rate of universal credit is essentially a tax cut for those on the lowest wages, and also proves to make sure that the incentives are aligned to take on more work and bring home more money. So I would totally agree with him, but I couldn't speculate on any future policies in that direction.
My Lords, I'd like to congratulate Lord Holmes of Richmond on his tenacity on this subject. It's a tenacity that's got to me, the fact that stands out to me, that 22% of adults have less than £100 in savings. And they're not just unlucky, they are victims. They are victims of policies by firms ranging from car parks to banks to reduce costs and hence make more profits. What we need is a comprehensive, holistic approach. Now, the government is going some way down that road, but the Financial Inclusion Commission wrote to Mr. John Glenn, setting out a comprehensive way forward, including the concept of a have regard duty on the FCA. Is that letter being responded to, and how does it fit in with the government's general approach?
My Lords, I'm sure that letter will be responded to, although I'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend John Glenn, who I think it was addressed to as Economic Secretary to the Treasury. He has done a huge amount in post to promote financial inclusion, but can I reassure noble Lords that work will continue. The FCA has, for example, consulted on its new consumer duty, and the noble Lord referenced those who don't have access to savings, and of course the government has the Help to Save programme to ensure that those who are on low incomes get more support to save so that they have a financial buffer for when times are tough for themselves too.